Okay, looks like we are good to go. I will adjust this. Let me just check on the Facebook feed that we are good to go. It says we are waiting for guests to arrive. But usually this takes about 30 seconds, and it's been about 30 seconds. So let's confirm that we're good to go, and then we can say, yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another brand new Rugby Muscle podcast. I'm your host, as always, TJ, and today we are doing, once again, the Facebook Q&A on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook group. I've received a good amount of questions actually today, so I'm going to use up the full hour. I do apologize for being late. My Ecamm, which is the software that I use to broadcast these, was playing up. I was actually logged out because I'm finally back on my original MacBook, but I couldn't remember. Well, I remembered the password. I thought I remembered the password, but it turns out I got the email wrong, and then I couldn't remember the password. As I tried to type it in, it's one of those things where I know why I mess it up. It's because it makes you require all the numbers and all the letters and all the capitals and a symbol. And if you don't do that, then you get logged out. So and I can't use my software that I use. So all of that is to say, sorry for being late, but we will use as much time as necessary to answer all of your questions today. But before I get into that, I do want to give a shout out because we got a review in, and the first one of 2021, which means we have someone who has won a free. You can either win the first 2 weeks of Team Rugby Muscle when it relaunches for free, or you can have a free consult. I don't mind a consult whatsoever. Just shoot me a message at CJ_rugby to claim that prize, and that is going to, once I've pulled up the review, T2020 T10. No idea what that is a reference to, but he says, excellent information. Really got into the Rugby Muscle podcast, beneficial for rugby specific, but also gives great tips and advice for those players not playing rugby for health, fitness, mindset development. Awesome review. Thank you so much, T20 2010. I'm going to keep trying to say that name. Yeah, that's the idea. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think it's something that, the more I do these lives, the more people that pay attention to the Rugby Muscle podcast sort of understand that as much as I preach about, what you need for rugby and that you are a rugby athlete first and foremost, the training isn't just always going to be nothing but rugby specific. You actually have to do, you have to be a better human to then use that to become a better player. I think I'm going to be messing around with my hair all podcast, but for now we'll keep pursuing and we will get into the questions. But before that, as usual, I do have to give my my stupid shit I did in the pursuit of gains for this week. I'll go with this week. Because I haven't got too many questions, I don't think, on diet. I'll talk about diet. So I did the paleo diet for about a year and a half or so. I was convinced that bread was going to kill you. I was convinced that grains are evil, that you should just have maybe rice, but mostly just potatoes. I don't know why. It just seemed so appealing at the time. And, I still ended up not being able to lose weight because I just ate a shit ton of coconut oil, which, I mean, if I was a white caveman, where would I have access to coconut oil? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I did that, and I thought I was going to get huge as a result. I didn't lose any weight. I didn't get shredded. I just struggled to actually make any progress in my diet because I didn't have it quantified. So I had no idea what I was doing, and that is today's stupid shit in the pursuit of gains. Let's get into the question, shall we? So, first and foremost, Simon Dixon. He's clarified his question from last week. He's 6'6", 96 kilogram lock. Good at speed, fitness, and athleticism and jumping in the line out. I'd like to be a more powerful scrummager and better lifter in the line out. What kind of training program should I focus on? In lockdown in London, so it looks like no games anytime soon, so lots of time to home gym, got barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, etc. bench, squat rack, dude, awesome. That's like, first and foremost, congratulations for having a home gym in lockdown. You are going to be able to make like really good progress, and um, you should. This should be a time where you really capitalize on it. So good on you for having that access to that. Good on you for asking this question, because it's something that I would have answered differently if I didn't know you had a home gym. Age does sort of play a factor into this, so I did ask, hoping to see if I could get Simon's age, but we haven't got that. But so it doesn't really matter too much. What we want to understand is, first and foremost, Simon is the guy who asked the kettlebell question last week about what sort of things we can use for kettlebells to make him a better player. And if you've got access to barbells and dumbbells, the kettlebells can be, again, another tool in that maybe for like bent over rows or something. You could do single arm bump kettlebell rows. That could work. I'm trying to think of any other things that I would use it for. Probably nothing, because they're only 16 kilos and 24 kilos. So yeah, so I'm gonna just refer back to last week for the kettlebell part of that, or the other question that you asked last week. In terms of being a better scrummaging second row, being more powerful scrummager, I'd say as a second row, it's more one of the biggest things about being a second row is weight, because you're just literally you want to be a big block of mass supporting your prop. Yes, you want to be strong and you want to be exerting force, but you do need a certain amount of just thickness, a certain amount of weight that is right behind the prop's arse, just holding them steady, And yes, that weight needs to be backed up by a good, strong lower body and core force pushing forward. But if you're 96 kilograms and 6'6", I'd say that, gaining weight would be my priority for you if you really want to be better at scrummaging and lifting in the line out. I think if you refer to the Rugby physical preparation pyramid on YouTube, what you'll see is the size will support everything else. So, you're already quite athletic. So as long as you maintain that athleticism with a certain amount of jumps or a certain amount of conditioning each week, you'll got like the size you put on. It's not like you're going to put on 10 kilos in 3 months and not be able to handle that. You're going to put on, if you put on size slowly but surely, whilst also maintaining your level of conditioning, you're going to be able to keep your athleticism, or if worst case scenario, get it back within 2 or 3 weeks of like more athletic training. But this focus for you needs to be on size. That's really it. And there are so many different ways you can really go about doing that. But I think that would have to be the main priority. If you're 6'6" and you're 96 kilograms, like I don't want to say you're a beanpole, dude, but that's not the thickness that you would want to be to scrummage the best of your ability. I think that would also help with everything else. It's just a little bit more mass behind everything. It's also, obviously, the more muscle you have, the more potential you have for the everything else, the strength and the power. If you've already got good speed, as long as you're maintaining that, I would just maybe put a tempo workout in, tempo runs once a week would be fine to maintain that. Or if nothing else, just do 1 or maybe 2 low intensity conditioning sessions. That would be fine. And you would do that throughout. So I'd focus 3 months minimum here on gaining some size. That's 12 weeks. Maybe you gain 3 to 4 kilograms, which would be phenomenal, and probably not all muscle, let's be honest. And then you would just try and use a few weeks to try and either lose whatever fat you've got there, or it wouldn't matter because you are that light for a second row. I would just then spend about 4 weeks following that working a bit more power, a bit more athleticism, just to realize that size and take advantage of all of that and get your speed back, potentially, depending on when the season is. And then I'll go back into mostly training for size. The more you do of the other stuff, so, the high intensity training, the other stuff, that just takes away from your recovery resources that you really need to dedicate to gaining size. Gaining size is the long-term process that is the goal here. I could even use myself as an example of how this works, because if you look at myself this time last year, I was a good 12-ish, maybe more, kilograms lighter. And actually, 15 kilograms lighter right at the beginning of the year. Now, I'm not as lean as I was, but the point being, I've gained a good deal of muscle, and I spent the whole year mostly, like, just because I didn't have as much access to the jiu-jitsu training that I'd like to have had. The year was spent just gaining size more than anything else, and it was spent a little bit too much, if I'm honest, for my mentality wise, training like a bodybuilder. There are points where I'm just like, I can't be bothered to do this. This is not, I want to do strength work, or I want to do, power work. I want to try, go back to doing my conditioning. But the reality is, what would I be doing conditioning for? That I have no access to competitions. I have no access to like the higher level stuff where I need to be overly conditioned and overly prepared. I had no level to like some sort of training camp or anything, and so it didn't make sense to do the conditioning. It makes sense to keep progressing with my jiu-jitsu the 2 or 3 times a week that I was at most with the technique, and then to spend all of my actual recovery, my tough physical recovery resources on gaining the size. And it ended up with me training a little bit too much like a bodybuilder, and I had to if you go back to the questionnaire that I put out on the Facebook group, the goal setting for the year, it's something that I actually had to sort of have a heart-to-heart with myself with, and realize that I'm not training to be a bodybuilder. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I don't want to put a fucking pair of Y fronts on and stand on stage and pose. Like, that's not my deal. I do want to be big. Like, my goal was to be a heavyweight jiu-jitsu competitor, not a bodybuilder that is as big as possible. So I've gone by the process of gaining the size, and now I need to, I'm excited now to actually sort of do a lot more athletic training at this size and maintain it as best I can. I'll probably potentially lose a little bit of muscle and then go back into training for size a little bit, and it will just be, a balancing act between the two of those. And that's what you've kind of got to do here, Simon, going forward, is heavy emphasis on the gaining of the size, and then sort of flirt between the two, because that gaining size will be essentially a never-ending process for someone that's 6'6" and 96 kilograms. If you to put on 5 to 10 kilograms of muscle, that would take a while, and it's whilst training for rugby as well and trying to keep the athleticism. It's like a balancing act, and it's like a back and a forth where you're going to be spending. And now during lockdown, when you've got home gym access, when you haven't got rugby, now is the time to train for size, because that's where you can put all of your recovery resources. Then when you go back to training for rugby, you have to sort of go back and forth between putting them towards your rugby, putting towards your athleticism, and putting them towards gaining your size. And you go back and forth and sort of flirt with that as best you can. Okay? If you want to keep following up on that, Simon, as always, just ask in the group. Looks like we've got some people watching live. Please give it a thumbs up. It helps spread the show into people's news feeds and makes more people join on the live. And if we get questions asked live, then I get to them straight away. If you have any comments or questions, guys, that are joining live, as always, ask those. But it looks like we don't right now, so we'll go back to the preloaded questions. Joe asks, any tips on training tackling solo? Is it even possible? And he does the laughy emoji, the crying laughter emoji, which is hilarious. So that is a funny question. What's funny to me is, like, most people don't train tackling. They're like, how do I train in the gym to become a better tackler? And then they don't do any tackling training at all. And it's a bit of something that I think we miss in rugby, is that we don't do too much technical tackling training, or especially at a lower level. At a low level, we take it all for granted. And I think I said this last week on the podcast with regards to scrum halves and passing and what the professionals do versus what the amateurs do. The fact is, if you've got for your team has 90 minutes or so a week to train to prepare yourself for the game the next week, most of that is going to be spent tactically, and most of it is going to be spent doing, like, just playing games. But really, like, you've got to understand, if you're not a good tackler, you need to spend time just developing your tackling. I know that I'm going to get to the question, but it's so important that you spend time just breaking down the skill of tackling, and how you would go about doing it. And now, even for this question, I think it does depend on who you are as a player and what you need to work on, to become a better tackler. Because it could be that you struggle to get low. It could be that you struggle to hold on to someone when you make that tackle, or struggle to wrap, or you struggle to explode into them with your lower body. Maybe your lower body doesn't have a good enough footwork to block them off to find the right position. Maybe you're launching from like a meter away, and you're never going to be able to make that tackle no matter how strong you are. It could be that you're good at tackling, but only when someone is really close to you and you just lack the speed to get to there. It could be that you don't read the game as well. It could be that you don't move as perfectly as you can, and you're a little bit clumsy and heavy-footed. So those are all physical components, but then it could also be that you lack the technique. So that's the technique portion of it. I would then, create that needs analysis for where you need to improve as a tackler, and then work on those things kind of individually. Okay. That's how I would do it. And it could be that you just stand a pad up and you just hit the pad on your own, and I tell you what, the most useless fucking drill is that if you just stand a pad up and you just line it up from 10 meters out, you just fucking sprint it and you just fucking deck it and stand up. But everyone always does it. It's so funny. Like no one is ever getting tackled like that. What you got to do instead is like figure out where you chop your feet, get into the right position, hit it. And it's difficult with those tackle bags because they're so weightless. So it's not like mimicking a tackle at all. There are different movements that are quote unquote functional that might help. Last week I spoke about the front squat. I do like anything that puts you in a front rack position because that really does work the core and explode in that way. But I think that, it's difficult to say really, without knowing specifically what you want to work on with tackling. And I don't know what the rules are for lockdown wherever you are if you have to tackle solo. But also just getting a buddy and working through technique like you wouldn't believe. It's how much gains there are to be had there by just getting a little bit technically smooth. And you would work stuff, you're like, fuck, I'm not 7 years old. Why am I learning this stuff? Because no one learns this stuff. No rugby players learn the skill of tackling. You're just told, all right, go tackle that guy. What? Like, that's it. And then no one ever breaks down that skill. So that could be a really good idea to do, and actually it's something that I want to introduce as part of Team Rugby Muscle. Is we're going to be doing breakdown videos where you look at areas where you want to look at your game and see where you lack and then see how you can improve it. So tackling will be one of those areas. So I'll be able to break down like why this player missed this tackle, why this player missed this tackle. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But yeah, look out for that. Team Rugby Muscle coming soon. Let's check on the live feed. Any questions that are coming in? Oh, yeah. I need to pull that up. I did it last week. There we go. This question here says, what's your go-to pre-game ritual day before and before the match? Good warm-up. Should I go jump in my freezing cold pool today and get a light swim? Humble brag that you've got a freezing cold pool, I think is what's happening there. It doesn't say who asked the question. I'm pretty sure. Doesn't matter. I imagine. Oh yeah, it's Corey. What's up, Corey? You could do whatever makes you feel good. To be honest, it's like you need to reduce fatigue by reducing stress. So whether that is taking your mind, like I used to really like getting through a real solid day of work the day before a game when I was working part-time, and I would just try and take on clients. I actually sometimes when I worked at the gym at the rugby club that I played at, I used to deliberately try and get in one session the day before a game. Not the day before a game, the day of a game, if we were playing at home, just to take my mind off of it. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes people do is they just think about the game and they think about the game and they think about the game and they fucking stress themselves out. And that in itself causes fatigue. You want to be chill, right? So whatever you got to do to feel chill and to feel relaxed. If jumping in the freezing cold pool is something that relaxes you, go ahead and do that. That's not a bad idea at all. I think on this group there is a game day guide. If not, there is one for the Team Rugby Muscle guys, so I'll send you that one over. But essentially, get in some carbohydrates. You don't have to overfeed. You don't have to go nuts with it. And then before the match, I used to, again, a routine that would be specific to you really is the most important part of that. I would also say, and this is something that's quite important, is this 2020 to 2021 season, for all levels of rugby. I mean, then potentially even like as high a level as the Heineken Cup. I mean, and internationals to an extent, has been somewhat of a wash. And now that we're just getting back into rugby, it's like you should be using these games. Like you have until, like, everyone that's watching this and listening to this needs to wait and or could find so much value out of just targeting the beginning of the 2021 season, because nobody's, I've got guys on my roster that I've spoken to about this quite in depth that want to get signed to contracts and stuff. I said no one's picking people and getting contracts based off of a random game that was played during lockdown, or no one's winning any leagues this year because most of amateur rugby has been cancelled. No one's picking up signing contracts or scouting players or pushing someone to a new squad or anything like that based off of the back of a couple friendlies that are happening the springtime this year, if they do happen. They're done to get people out the fucking house and playing rugby because it's fun. So you should do that. You should use these games right now. Almost, I wouldn't quite say use them as training sessions, but something close to that, right? You'd use them as a gauge to be like, oh, okay, I'm definitely still unfit. Or maybe you go back and you're like, oh, I'm actually quite fitter than everyone else. Like, cool. All I need to do now is maintain my fitness. And if you're Simon from earlier, cool. All I need to do is maintain my fitness. I'm still fast enough. I'm faster than most of the other people. I'm second row. I can definitely double down and focus on just my strength training or my weight training to get bigger. And so sort of that's how I would play it. Hopefully that makes sense. That's essentially how I would do it. I wouldn't overthink it, if it is kind of the point, right? And that's the rule in general for most games, is like, you're not going to look back and like, I look back on my career and I think I didn't enjoy it as much as I wish I had done. Like, I really did enjoy it. Even at the time, I feel like I was enjoying it. But I look back and I think I could have enjoyed it even more. I put a lot of pressure on myself. And really, like, you can be liberated by the fact that if you just remember that no one really cares. There's no pressure on you. The only pressure is the pressure that you're putting on yourself. And you're not going to look back 20 years' time and go, this was the game, because I was so focused. You're just going to look back and remember the games because of the games, because they were fun. And all other people in life will do that as well. So just take the pressure off. Do whatever you can to relax, enjoy the game, and get back to your training straight off the back of it. Let's go to the next question. Shout out to everyone giving a thumbs up. Thank you so much. As always, do that on the YouTube channel. We've got some questions. We've got a question from the YouTube channel, which I will answer. Fuck it. I'll answer it now. Actually, got two questions from the YouTube channel, so we'll go for the first one first. Not first one second. That would be weird. Mr. Johnstone says, currently following your advice and going big on the low-intensity cardio. Good man. And agree with you that it's very unnatural and it feels like I'm doing nothing, especially since I've always tried to kill myself when I train. Do you think that including a full-blown killer anaerobic running workout once a week will supplement the aerobic work or actually take away from the benefits of the cardio due to increased stress? I'm missing the feeling of blowing out my ass, to be honest. Okay, so first and foremost, I would say that if it feels really like you're doing nothing, you can always progress. It should be between 120 to 140 of your heart rate, 6 out of 7. If you're that unsure that you're getting to, if you don't have a heart rate and you're just gauging a 6 or a 7 out of 10, and you're just thinking, that's probably about 120, 140-ish. Again, 140 is really the top end. if you're thinking that you're not sure, if you're thinking that it's too easy and you're not using a heart rate monitor, I would invest and buy a Polar heart rate monitor. You can pick up one for like $20 now, or you can even use like one of the shitty fitty bitties, right? And that'll cost you like $20. They're not expensive, and that would give you a good gauge of where your heart rate is at, and make sure that you're not like sort of kidding yourself and going too easy. I definitely do think that sometimes it does feel like you're going too easy, and then you sort of extend out that time. So, 30 minutes of low intensity might be easy, but 45 minutes might be a little bit more difficult, or 45 or 40 minutes or 35 minutes, just a tiny bit extra intensity. I'm talking like you put a 0.2 extra on the treadmill if that's what you're doing, or you go just a little bit faster, and then you go for 40 minutes non-stop. That makes it a lot more difficult. I'd look at doing that. I definitely think that could be the answer, because yes, it should be easy. And maybe it is too easy if you're always used to really pushing yourself to the point where you feel like you're dying. But the fact is, if you've always pushed yourself to the point where you feel like you're dying and you haven't got as fit as you thought you were going to get on the pitch, that should tell you something. And it should tell you that that's not because you're not trying hard enough. It's because you haven't developed yourself in the right conditioning way to become a better rugby player. And that's what the low intensity stuff is there to do. So, yes, I don't think there is any benefit to doing the anaerobic once a week. I do think that I agree with your second part, where it definitely does take away from the benefits of the aerobic. Not that it takes away, but it just gets in the way. It's like a perfect example is what you're doing when you're trying to do the anaerobic stuff and you're trying to go as hard as you can to push yourself. You're doing that more to test yourself. You're doing that more as like a test, and it'll be similar to like what you're doing when you're doing the low intensity stuff. Is you're working on yourself. You're under the engine of the race car and you're working on the do you work underneath or do you pop the hood? I don't know how cars fucking work, man. Whatever you're doing, you're working on the inner workings of that race car, and you're making it go everything go a little bit smoother. You're cleaning the pipes. You're you're cleaning the engine. I don't know what people do with engines. You're working on the engine, and slowly but surely you're getting all this work done, right? Every time you take that car out of the garage and test it, yes, you're able to get a gauge and push it hard and get an idea of how hard that car can go now, and the new speed, and it feels more like an event, right? Because it feels more like the race. But then you have to wait for the car to cool. You can't just then, first off, you lose that time where that car is being tested around that track, right? You lose that time where you cannot be working. You can't be doing that low intensity work. So you've lost that session. You then go back into the garage. You can't just work straight back onto that engine straight away. You've got to let everything cool down. You've got to clean it a little bit, or you've got to do whatever. And then only after you've waited a good deal of time for that fatigue to drop, can you then get a good, effective session after that. And the more you can work on the car with the engine just being nice and cool and with everything being in order, the better. It does take a little bit of faith. So that's why I do encourage getting a heart rate monitor and making sure that you are working that 120 to 140. Then if you really want to make sure that you're pushing yourself, and you feeling tired isn't the goal, but if you really want to make sure that you're pushing yourself hard, I would look at doing the high intensity stuff. So, the really high end alactic work. So I'm talking 6 to 10 seconds at most, sprints or any really high intensity powerful activity. Then you rest for a minute or so, and then you go again. You try and match that. You don't try to match that intensity. You must match that intensity. The second that intensity drops off, stop the session. Or you go for that time period and you work capacity. So you take shorter, smaller intervals, but you just keep going. And you go for 2 to 3 minutes at most. You go to 5 to 6 intervals, and you could do that a few times. That's one that the guys on Team Rugby Muscle really did enjoy, and they found difficult. But it's tough, but it's not something that it really is working your lactic system, or it's kind of anaerobic, but it's not lactic in the way that you would think. And that's how you get a tough workout from that. Cool. Where are we? Next question. again, if that makes sense, tell me what you're going to do with that, Mr. Johnson. Let me know. I'm keen to hear. All right, Hamilton says, here's one for you. I've noticed on some of the upper body days, even after a good warm up, that all the blood in my arms kind of gets stuck, if you will. It's happened twice now recently. My arm kind of gets stuck, if you will. The blood in my... Okay. It's like they're inflated. Yes, but I need them to deflate a little so I can continue. Hope that makes sense. Dude, that's the pump. That's definitely the pump. Let me see if I can do this. I know I can do this on this software, so hold on one second. Let me type in something. Yeah. Okay. This is what you're talking about here, Hamilton, my man. This is going to be worth it, people. Well, to me, it's already worth it, so. I nailed it. Yeah. Is that what you're talking about? This is legendary. If you haven't watched Pumping Iron, you have to watch it. Uh, okay, so maybe it doesn't sound like Hamilton. You're happy about this, that you feel like you're coming, but it feels like your muscles is about to explode, huh? Yeah, it's just all that is essentially, especially when you're doing higher rep stuff, which you are doing because that's the phase that we're in with Team Rugby Muscle. Um, like you're going to get a good metabolite accumulation, which is the blood grouping into the muscle. It's a good thing, particularly when you're not using overly heavy weights, because it means that you're supplying those muscles, or you're able to supply those muscles with a lot of nutrients, with a lot of growth. That's going to help them essentially grow in size, get somewhat stronger. Because the size will eventually help the strength. It also does help the oxidative properties of the muscle, meaning that you are like, it's a good way to be able to flush out, or to train the body to flush blood through, so that when you're working high intensity stuff in a game, that it flushes out fatigue muscle faster. The better, the more that you can like the better you can teach a muscle to work off of oxidated, or get in oxygenated blood, and then pump it out, is going to be better for you. So it's really good. And again, if you, for most people do it on Team Rugby Muscle, we are, we're not having too much access to weights, and I like to keep people somewhat organized. So we are doing higher rep stuff, and that is a good way to make sure that you're at least growing the muscle, and working on the condition at the same time. Now, in terms of what you can do to stop it, I mean, just number one, staying hydrated is actually something that you can do to promote it, but it's also something that you can do to stop it being debilitating, and something that you can do to help flush it out quite quick. Otherwise, just keep getting used to it, and make sure that you just get back to going again, and realize that yes, it's going to affect you, but it's a pump feeling. It's not a debilitating feeling where you have to all the time stop your session. Okay, got another question in on the live. This is, what is the best rugby cardio for those trying to get fit? Where do I start with this question? Aerobic stuff. Any aerobic work is where most people will lack. This is usually my biggest tip that I give to people who come to me and they want to get fitter for rugby. It's you don't understand that rugby. Most people don't understand that rugby is an aerobic sport. They prefer to just do their weights and then do 30 minutes of cardio extra as high, not even 30 minutes. They'll do 10 minutes of a finisher or 20 minutes of a finisher or high intensity cardio, and then they wonder why they can't perform for 80 minutes. Well, rugby's a game that's played for 80 minutes, so you should train not necessarily 80 minutes, but you should train that lower intensity that you can maintain that intensity going forward. You're spending 95+% of your game jogging, running slowly, walking, standing still. You want to be able to train your your aerobic system to allow you to perform as best you can in the high intensity zones when you need to, not to constantly stay at a 70% zone or to stay at an 80% zone or a 90% zone or flirt between 90 to 70 to 90 to 70. No, it's literally 90 back down to 0 or 10 and recover. And it's in those the better you get at those recovery phases is something that happens due to you being more aerobically fit. So work on your aerobic fitness. Then look at where else do you suffer? Do you suffer from your movement? Do you suffer from not being big enough? Like the second row that I asked earlier. If you took Andy Good into your team, and pick on Andy Good because he's quite a ledge, but if you took a fatter, older, unconditioned player who played at the highest level, he's not going to be really unfit and really struggle to play because he'll be playing at that much of a lower comfortable level that he'll be able to do whatever he needs to do, right? So it's not a case of him being unfit, it's him being so good at the sport. So really focus on where you need to improve at the sport. Do you need to be bigger? Do you need to be stronger? And then that in itself makes you fitter. There's no quote unquote rugby cardio that is there's none. The fucking and if you come at me with the Bronco, I will fucking shoot you because that is not a good way to get rugby fit. Come at me, haters. All right, Jeremiah says, I'm a rugby player in... maybe it's Jeremiah. Rugby player in France. I'm looking to get into the first division next year. I've been trying different workout splits, but I'm still asking myself, what is the best workout split for a rugby player? Should I work out 4 times a week or 3 workouts are enough? Right, so he then goes into the different splits, which I'll get into after, but I'll nail this first. Whatever you can be consistently week in, week out training is the split that you need to train. If you cannot make 4 times a week, 4 times out of 5, or maybe 3 times out of 4, just do the three split. And then if you have extra time, do that extra light aerobic work. So maybe you do, maybe 2 weeks out of every 3 or 4 weeks, you're able to get in 4 times. Well, that extra session just use as fluff work, your light conditioning stuff, do that. That would then give you massive benefit, but it's not interfering with trying to reorganize your 3 strength sessions that you're doing a week. And that way, you're able to stay consistent. The biggest barrier to most people progressing their training is the consistency that allows them to make sure that they are progressing their training. Most people, they'll do a bench press for 2 weeks and then they'll fuck it off and they'll do an overhead press or they'll do a dumbbell press because they want to change it up or they'll change to a machine or whatever. And now you don't know if you're getting stronger. Now you're leaving it to subjective feelings, which with strength, it's not a good way to do it. You want to be really specific and you want to make sure that you're introducing just a little bit more stress each week, like a little bit more weight or a couple more reps, whatever. But you need to be introducing a little bit more stress, however which way you want to introduce it, systematically week on week. So if you're flirting by doing 4 weeks and then 4 days a week, and then sometimes you've got to drop out on 3, so where do you add in that extra work? It gets all confusing. Stick to the 3, okay? But if you can consistently stay for 4, do 4, because 4 sessions is going to be better than 3. I hope people don't get me wrong when they hear me say, whatever it is that you can say. Because if you can do 4, it's probably going to be more beneficial than 3. If you can do 5, probably going to be more beneficial than 6. I mean, probably going to be more beneficial than 4. I'm not sure if 6 is definitely more beneficial than 5, because there is a point where probably having 2 days of full recovery is a good idea. But with that being said, it depends how you organize it, right? Because you don't necessarily. And so this leads me to the second part of the question, where he says, I'm currently working out 3 times a week. Monday strength, Wednesday hypertrophy, Thursday power. Each workout's full body. But I'm thinking about changing it to upper strength, lower strength, Wednesday, upper, Thursday, lower. What do you think? Should I stick to the first option? Second option is not good, just because you're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you're taking Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So like you over fatigue with the first few sessions, and then you almost you give yourself too much time off that you don't necessarily become detrained in 3 days, but there's a lot of scope there to make some further improvement. So I try and spread it over the week if you can. Now, the fact that you've done the Monday and Wednesday, Thursday thing suggests to me that this is talking about in season probably, and you're playing on Saturday, so therefore it becomes a little bit more awkward. I would still, if you're trying to do a power day, I would try and do it the day before a game. If you're doing a hypertrophy day, I would try, depending on your position. It does greatly differ depending on how you play and where you play and whatnot. But I do like to try and get some people to put their hypertrophy days the day after a game, like a real light day. You're not doing fucking sets of 15 on the squats the day after a game, but you could be doing a few sets of shoulder extensions or lateral raises, or guns, or light dumbbell bench presses, things like that can be definitely done the day after a game, and therefore you're then able to do that hypertrophy stimulus 6 days before the next game, and give yourself 5 days of other training to do. It could also help with recovery. And I know and have known a lot of players that have played at a real high level, and that's how they've done it. And sometimes they've even said that they get their best sessions in on the Sunday because they're already pretty sore, but once they get the blood flow, they feel good. And they know that they're able to put a little bit more in because they've got so much time for recovery. The other thing that stood out to me there is that you're doing a strength day, a hypertrophy day, a power day on the first split, and in the second split you're doing 2 strength days, 2 hypertrophy days. I think here it's again one of those things where, yes, you can probably do strength and hypertrophy at the same time, or you could probably do power and strength at the same time. You could probably even do power and hypertrophy at the same time, but I wouldn't do all 3, and I would, I wouldn't do strength, hypertrophy, like in 4 consecutive days. That's quite a lot of stress, and it's quite difficult to recover from that. I would really hone in on what you want to improve. Is it do you need the strength, or do you need the hypertrophy? Either way, if you're going to do the 3 sessions, you could do it where you could do 2 strength sessions and 1 hypertrophy session, or 2 power sessions and 1 hypertrophy session, or 2, however you want to split it up. But I'd really focus in on what you actually need to improve. It's a really difficult question to answer because I don't know any more. I don't have any more context on it. And so Jeremiah, feel free to sort of get more specific. I know you're in the Facebook group now, so come back again and be a little bit more specific with what you're trying to improve and what you're trying to do to improve these things, and why. I'm assuming you're in season, but I don't even know that. So yeah, get back to me and we'll answer that again. I think we've got another question before we wrap this up. Hope we're all doing good out there, by the way. I know it feels like, I think I already gave some advice on COVID, but I do think that, we are there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is more than likely going to be a 2021 season. 2021 is in the year 21. That's very poorly spoken by me. Just say 21 to 22. Okay, there is a 21 to 22 season that is going to happen, more than likely. And so I think with whatever rugby that there is to be had this year, take it, like I said, to the advice I already gave there earlier. Take it and enjoy it. But really, your goal for your training gives you a chance to really step back and say, right, where do I want to be by September 2021? and what do I need to improve on? And then now you've got 8 months to go about doing that. Like you could really spend 3 months in 2 different areas and 2 months in one other area, or that's so much fucking time. Don't rush this process. That would be the biggest advice I'd give. So many people were going to try and, like perfect example was some of these questions I've been getting. How do I improve all these things, or how do I know? You've got time, and the body adapts really slowly. Like I said, my strength training, my training to gain size has lasted me a full year to actually have actualized the size that I'm happy to be sat at now. It takes a long time. So don't be, at any point, if I had have gone in, and normally, like, I'm sort of lucky that the jiu-jitsu season was sort of cancelled, because if it had came up that I could have done competitions in the next 8 weeks or whatever, I'd have aborted trying to gain size, and I would have probably would have even tempted to cut down to a lower weight class or do something completely against the goal that I was going for, and then I'd be sat here nowhere near as big and still having to worry about getting that monkey off my back of getting that size back and doing all that. Whereas I've really fully bought into the goal of getting bigger, and that allowed me to get bigger. So much so that it almost took away, and I almost ended up thinking I was a bodybuilder for a sec there. I'm not. But it's that long-term mindset. It's really, really important. You really hone in on the goals that you want to improve on. Okay. Mr. Johnstone, again, on the YouTubes, we have time to answer his last question before we leave for today. He says, you mentioned glaring weaknesses, but I think the issue with a lot of players, including myself, is that I don't actually know what my weakness is. Pretty well rounded for my level of rugby, and have a few areas where I suspect I could be weak, but I don't know for sure. I know what you will say it depends, but a discussion about some simple performance parameters might be useful. For example, I can back squat. Let me just read the rest of this. Back squat, one parallel to 170. My max deadlift is only 140. Seems poor to me, but I'm not sure if it is. Whether balancing out this would be much of a benefit given the time and energy it would take to correct it. In terms of fitness, if I can run 400 meters in 50 seconds, but it takes an hour to run a 10K. Does this need to be balanced out? An idea for a video, perhaps? Okay, well, yeah. I mean, it is an idea for a video. I think. So when I say a glaring weakness, what you've done there is you've given yourself fitness tests that, like, I don't know their relevance to rugby. They're not going to be great. So, like, for example, the back squat. I know world-class backs or world-class forwards that don't have a 170 kilogram back squat. So does that mean that you're on their level? No. Like, strength is one thing, and then we're looking at strength for specific lifts. That's another thing. Like, 140 kilo deadlift. Yeah, that's weaker than what you'd expect for someone that can parallel squat 170, but maybe you're not squatting it, maybe you're not quite parallel, or maybe you're really good at squatting, but you're not quite good at deadlifting. And I'm sorry for saying, I was going to say it depends, but it does depend, because there are people that just don't have the mechanics to deadlift at all. Maybe that's you. Maybe that you're more efficient at squatting. Maybe none of these lifts even matter, because what you're looking at here is you're looking for a glaring weakness in your lifts. You need to be looking at or other fitness tests where, like, 400 meters in 50 seconds. Like, who runs 400 meters in a game? Nobody. But it takes an hour or so to run 10K. People might run 10K in a game, but not, and that's a 10K would be more of a better balance to figure out your aerobic system. But I'd say 5K is enough. But what you're doing here is just testing, and you're testing from physical tests that you have available to you, which is okay. But the real test you need and what you want to improve upon is how well do you play rugby, and where do you know, or where do you feel like you need to improve upon. And that's kind of the weakness I'm sort of trying to get at. If, for example, like, we can go back to the first question with Simon, who knows that his weakness is scrummaging or scrummaging in the game. Now, does that mean he needs to work on just scrummaging all the time? Well, no, because then we look at the fact that he's 96 kilograms and we're like, well, that's quite light. So there's your weakness. Put on some size. And everyone does have should have some sort of area like that. And if you feel like you're quite well balanced overall, then pick somewhere that you don't have as a weakness, but you want to be a strength. For example, if you're quite well rounded as a number 8, for example, right, and you're pretty fit, you carry well, you're strong in the ruck, you're doing everything, you're big enough, you're strong enough, everything, you do everything really well. Maybe you want to work on becoming really fucking fast, like you exploding out the back of a scrum is somewhere you want to improve upon. Or when you get the ball in some wide play, you want to work on your feet and your speed. You spend 3 months just working speed, acceleration, footwork. Like, that's going to have massive dividends in your game, and as long as you maintain the other areas, or you don't degrade in the other areas, and that's really simple, then you're able to become a better player. And that's where I would look at. And it definitely is a good idea for definitely is a good idea to answer. Oh, I missed that question. That's what's distracting me. Definitely is something that I can develop on another video, but overall, and I think, we can develop some tests for this rugby physical preparation pyramid, or just ways that you could tell. But overall, it's like rugby isn't a game that's solved by just crunching the numbers. It's a game that's solved on the pitch, however which way you want to solve it yourself. Look at the different players in the same positions. There are so many that are complete different athletes, or they play the game completely differently. Or people that are the same player that have evolved their game over the years. There's so many different ways that you can accomplish it, and just to rely on treating yourself like you are a chess piece, you're not. You're the chess player. So play the game however you want to play about it, and then work on how you can play that game best you can. All right. I missed one question, but I haven't copied the name of the guy that asked it. So we'll wait and we will answer that question next week. Thank you guys so much for joining. As always, if you made it all the way to the end, thumbs up, man. Especially on the YouTube. Thumbs up and ask questions on there. Been really enjoying these already this year. They've been good questions. Well thought out, and they allow me to sort of really lay out the land for you and really feel like I'm helping you out of your training. So thank you guys for that. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, supporting the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook group. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.